Now, please welcome our moderator of this session, Mr. Merlin Lau, Head of Policy and Research of BEC. Let's also welcome Ms. Gillis to be back on stage. And now, please join me in welcoming our other panelists to the stage for the panel discussion. They are Mr. C.F. Wong, Commissioner for Climate Change, Environment and Ecology Bureau of the HKSAR, Dr. Van Dai, Research Committee Member, Institute for Climate and Carbon Neutrality, HKU, and lastly, Ms. Serena Mack, Executive Director, Sustainable Finance, Institutional Banking Group, DBS Bank, Hong Kong. Let's welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thought I have 1 hour, but not 15 minutes. Thank you again for coming, and actually thank you, Nancy, for really setting the scene. I probably did not do enough assignment that you have done so much on biodiversity before. And as you see this, other than Nancy, the other panelists, they all attended COP29. Probably I don't need to introduce CF Wong again for those residing in Hong Kong. And actually, Dr. Dai, she, per my understanding, she actually, apart from her current role in Hong Kong, she actually spent a lot of time in the US, working quite a bit also on subnational climate action, especially in California and also China provinces. And I think she will be in a really good context to give some perspective about China, US, and now Hong Kong. And also Serena, from DBS, I think this is a finance COP, right? I will recap some of the findings from COP, but probably the most sort of good news coming out from the finance angle. So that's how we line up this. And also on the floor, we know this year we had a quite big Hong Kong delegation, per my perspective. I attended a few COPs before, but that was long time ago. So, but this time we are happy to see many other delegation from Hong Kong. So the way I want to really make good use of the time, maybe I think it would be good for me to give for my assignment. I did a little bit of follow-up finding of post-COP29. I just want to recap that to help set the scene for our discussion. As it is themed as a finance COP, actually, if you read all the news, the biggest announcement is this new global target. We call it NCQG, New Collective Quantified Goal for Climate Finance, that we see particularly for developed countries, leading in raising $300 billion a year for developing countries by 2035, plus also pledging various of resources, and that also include developing countries and other voluntary resources to help scale up the fund to at least 1.3 trillion by 2035. Now you may call, actually, I think the last finance pledge is about 100 billion, and it was hard for even developed countries to really meet it, and now they have a so-called more ambitious goal, and I think we'll drill into NCQG. And the other aspect is actually finally the whole Paris Agreement, the last article on Article 6 on 6.2 country-to-country carbon trading, 6.4 on international carbon trading are now sort of operationalized. What that means? It means that the whole Paris Agreement is now sort of as I said, operationalized, potentially paving more way for carbon trading, which Hong Kong may play a role. I would say other than the finance aspect, of course, there is UAE dialogue from last year, calling the transitioning away from fossil fuel, mitigation work program, adaptation, loss and damage. If I keep on talking, I will use all the old time, but there's not too much negotiation text coming out. So the first 2 points on finance would be, I would see probably the biggest announcement in this COP. And a few more points is about countries, they need to submit their new National Determined Contribution, NDC, by February 2025, including China and other jurisdictions. And also, China, we think like particularly this year, it highlights its role. Just now we mentioned climate finance, right? So China actually deliver, according to its statement, like climate finance through developing countries mechanism, of course, such as Belt and Road Initiative, which is separate from the current developed country mechanism and also apart from NCQG. And last point, I also want to follow up what Nancy mentioned, right? At negotiation level, clearly there was not too much discussion officially putting climate and nature together because it's rigid. You have the UNFCCC conference on climate and UNCPD conference on biodiversity. But it is clear that outside the negotiation space, in many of the country pavilion, also business pavilions, there are more calls outside to consider, for instance, sort of like synergizing NDC and NBSAP, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan together. So that's how I sort of like tried to use a few minutes to recap for those who did not attend COP. I know it's difficult, but now we have the chance to really hear from our audience, like from our panelists, from their COP experience. So I will try to, I hope this panel will try to address a few points. How are these COP outcomes relate to Hong Kong? What roles Hong Kong can play? And of course, we mentioned countries will be setting up their NDC, including China. And also, Hong Kong does not need to set up its NDC, but how can Hong Kong contribute? And lastly, we will also try to pick up a little bit more. We talk about the importance of interlinking climate and nature together, and also building business case. But actually, how? Maybe we can have some more example on that. So with that, I would want to use the first 10 minutes to really pass the floor to our panelists who attended COP29 to sort of like share their mission, focus in the COP, and their like experience overall. With that, I think I would first really invite CF, sort of like working together, leading the Hong Kong delegation to COP. Maybe you can share a few words about your COP experience and your plan. Yeah.
Thank you, Merlin. This is a very special year in terms of the COP. I attended quite a number of COP before, but this is the first time Hong Kong participate in a COP in some sense. We hold, the Hong Kong SAR government hosts a side event in the China Pavilion to tell our counterparts in different parts of the world what Hong Kong is doing in combating climate change. We set out our strategy there and report some progress and talk about some future directions. So this is the first time. And the second thing is that we saw a lot of familiar faces in this conference this time. Not only those stakeholders we have been engaging in different parts of the world, but those from Hong Kong. We have a rough count of over 50 delegates or representatives from the Hong Kong from different organizations. So again, this is the first time we have been seeing this, and we have a very happy gathering. Many of the participants here were there, so correct me if I'm wrong. We have a very happy gathering there to exchange notes about what we did in the conference, what we shared in the conference, and what we could do more in the upcoming conferences. So this is the two very important observations we have at this particular conference. So there's a third one, which I shared with Nancy just before. This is a very particular year. It's really a kind of challenge. We noted that not like those in Dubai or in past conference. Many of these parties to the convention do not have their figurehead coming to the conference this year. So it's a challenge. But what we see is an opportunity, as I would just always advocate, as in many events in BEC. So what is the opportunity? So it's a difficult time around the world in terms of economy, in terms of this commitment in climate change. But it boils down to the role play of subnational level. So it's time for perhaps for some of this action to be taken more seriously at subnational level, so that there would still be taking the commitment to take forward the climate action agenda, because as many of you know that the nature is not waiting for us. It's not waiting for another 4 years. So let us do it in another way. So this is the observation I have in the conference.
Thank you. Thank you. You point out, I think you actually helped me cue Dr. Daifan into the scene. Like you highlight subnational actions, and as we all know, negotiation happen at national government level. So somehow, like subnational government, they are including other parties. They are considered as like non-state actors. So that means in the text, maybe they got flat, but actually outside the negotiation space, they have a lot of like bilateral agreement, collaboration, and I think Dr. Hai, you are in a very good position to share a few words about this. Yeah.
Sure, thank you, and thanks for including me for this panel. Maybe just as Nancy just gave a really nice speech, and I recognize Nancy used to work in the government in the US. I actually spent a lot of time working in the US as well in the government sector, but I worked particularly in California for the governors. And I just like to echo what Commissioner Wong mentioned, the importance about subnationals' role in the upcoming years. Especially we all know that in the US, not too long ago, we had an election, and looks like the president elected doesn't really quite believe in climate change. So we're actually faced quite some challenges in the US in terms of domestic and especially federal level actions. So domestically, I think US as an example, also one of the biggest emitters in the world that we will have to rely on instead of the federal policy, most subnationals, the state and the cities taking more serious actions to decarbonize, and more importantly, businesses in this transition for a decarbonized world and climate adaptation, which seem to be very urgent. And in my personal view, it's actually more urgent than some of the mitigation efforts needs to happen in the near future. This is actually the 10th COP that I have attended. And my other observation, in addition to subnational action, is that I think you just mentioned the NCQG about the financial commitment and the theme of this COP being finance. I like to share a little bit different view, maybe, and I apologize if that disappointed you. I think there is still very significant gap in terms of climate finance internationally. I think before the COP started, there was the G77, the group of 77 countries, include quite some developing countries as well, estimating the gap for global climate finance to help us get there for the 1.5 degree scenario is around 1.3 trillion. We all know what we agreed in the end after 2 weeks was about 300 billion. From 1.3 trillion to 300 billion, that's already a very apparent gap. But I think, to go further, and this is where I think Hong Kong comes into play, is in the world of climate finance, we can't really rely on public sources of funding. And the private sectors will have to play a larger role. I think Hong Kong, as a global financial center, could do much more in elevating the private sectors, listing companies in Hong Kong, and how they decarbonize their businesses. I think there is a much larger role for Hong Kong to play. So that's kind of my observation about climate finance piece and the link to the role of Hong Kong. Thank you.
Okay, that's why you sort of like spend half of your time in Hong Kong now, relocated. I think, so you help us also to pave in Serena, right? You also attended COP. Now you have a role in the banking industry. And we just now touch upon NCQG, particular 300 billion is from developed country. The gap is 1.3 trillion, and there's a watered down text that, okay, we try our best to meet 1.3. So how's your take from the NCQG?
Well, putting me at the last of these three questions with your preempt has basically put all my prep out of the window. So let me rephrase a little bit. So
you can introduce yourself
first of all, I think question is why am I even with this distinguished panel and why am I even in COP? So, well, glad to report we are also part of WBCSD. We're also quite actively in there. So on behalf of DBS Sustainability, the reason why we were at COP actually is I wear two hats. One is with DBS. The other one is with a local green group, Friends of the Earth Hong Kong, where we actually had an advocacy on energy transition in the region. And we were actually quite fortunate that in COP28 in Dubai, we were the first NGO in Hong Kong to work with the Financial and Services Development Council to have an event in the China Pavilion during the COP time but basically we quote unquote wanted to share what Hong Kong is doing, the Hong Kong story for transition finance. And also actually we gathered folks from standard setters with NGOs, with banks. I think exactly to Dr. Dai's point, we feel like the private sector in Hong Kong has a good role to play. Now, I think the ecosystem for sustainability, as we can see from the delegates, right, this time we've seen CF rightly pointed out we've got like good government delegation. I'm actually very happy to see representatives from the Hong Kong Observatory, very rightful attendees to events like COP to be actually in there. The other parts will be the EMSD, folks who are looking at like the building codes, etc. So I think we really kind of putting the cogs in motion for like a decarbonization ecosystem with government support somewhere in Hong Kong. So kind of that's why like we were there. Actually this is my second year in COP with 2 consecutive events under the China Pavilion, also signaling the support from the China Ecology and Environment Bureau on like Hong Kong's unique role. Now back to Hong Kong's unique role in like you were mentioning NCQG. So when it comes to finance, right, I have to put my banker's hat back on. It's all about the ROI. You cannot convince a bank or a business partner or even a multinational to actually participate in a climate project without a good business case justifying how much it's going to cost and when is the break even. And that's kind of where I see as one of the core challenges here, as people were kind of, is there really a first mover advantage? To be moving first in investing in something as we know has a very long-term impact, when people were already talking about the macroeconomic backdrop of where things are right now in Hong Kong, in China. Is this where we would be spending the money? That's where banks come in my opinion, because we've got the climate finance from the public side, and that's a good pocket of it. And we've got some of the investors who are willing to put up money, but maybe not 100% in the project. And then we've got the corporates who actually have developed really good projects on decarbonization. And so how do we as a bank play an intermediary role to structure the transaction such that everybody takes a bit of the risk and everybody takes a bit of the return? And we put everybody in a position where they get comfortable. For commercial banks, they feel comfortable in taking maybe the less risky part. Maybe there are family offices, foundations, or public money who are willing to take a slightly more riskier part, and then there's a corporate who are willing to pull up the technology. So I see like with Hong Kong being the financial center, with good international systems, with alignment with international standards, we are in a very uniquely well-positioned place to actually make that happen. But we can share more about that later. There are actually live examples how we can use finance as a tool to mobilize the ecosystem.
Thank you. Maybe then I also want to get Nancy to comment, right? So Serena also mentioned the banks play a specific role on sort of like one of the pillar to sort of take some risk and do structuring, and also mentioning who's going to do this like first mover advantage of work. So how do you see now you're in the business, like working with more business, like on sort of mobilizing finance piece, like what's your view on that?
Great. Well, this is, I think, the time when I remind everybody that I'm German, so I'm very practical, and I'm very transparent and very honest. That's a warning to my panel members as well. So what was this? I did not go to this COP by design. Because let's start talking about where the COPs have gotten us. Not where we need to be. And was I surprised that there was an honest statement of we need this much money that ended with the T for trillions, and we ended up with this much money, which ended with a B for billions. And I don't know about you from industry, but when you have that level of gap, how credible do you actually think that we're going to be able to make the necessary impact? So one could have, or one who has gone to many, many, many COPs has seen this coming, right? And I think one of the conversations that will face the next COP, which is unique because in its location in Brazil, it truly is the home of the nature that works for climate sink, right? The Amazon, while also being a climate COP. So to me, that's the best example of an interlinked COP. But it does set a very high threshold for the conversation of fit for purpose. How much are we actually now able to advance our goals through this global policy discussion? And how much now, if we actually, with time running out, do we need to rely on not only private sector, but specific space-based cities, municipalities, states, some states in the US who have the economy of several countries, so very influential. So I think, first and foremost, the question becomes what really is the role of COP and what could we learn from this COP as to what we might need to change. The second is the conversation about risk and finance. Yes, banks need ROI. We hear this a lot. Businesses need to have their ROI. And I am the first to talk about the business case. And it's a good question. Is it really advantageous to be the first mover? History shows no. But we're in a different situation. So are we ever going to have the ROI that banks normally can expect? No. Are companies going to get, right, the risk threshold down enough to where first mover, being the first one out there, is a good idea? No. Let's stop pretending that somehow magically this is going to happen. We can take some of the risk out of these conversations through the form of novel, innovative ways of insurance, right? And there was a good conversation that started in Baku about the changing role that insurance and insurance mechanisms must play. But even that is a Band-Aid. Somewhere, somebody in the arena of both financing for banks, but most importantly, for businesses, is going to have to stand up and be innovative, see the opportunity, and just step. Without the guarantees, without the expectation, without the spreadsheet that will make the normal return on investment argument. Because it's that level of investment and commitment that we need. Okay. That was the German part of me talking. If you catch the US part, I'm much more positive and upbeat.
Okay. To follow up on that, as I said, like apart from this NCQG, we see, of course, maybe some see positive and maybe many see like not ambitious enough. And they also approve Article 6. So 6.4 is approved. And I was also seeing TNC colleagues like following up very closely. Potentially this could help some of the nature project, I think. But people also say the carbon credit is too low, the price for nature project, and some start to call for biodiversity credit. And for the voluntary carbon market sector or international trading, they see it as a positive signal now international mechanism is approved. So how do you see now Article 6.4 get approved? Of course, there are methodologies, those kind of technical things following up through. Is it going to help a lot? What are you seeing upcoming year? Is it going to help our financing and our project? Would anyone want to start commenting on this question about Article 6? Anyone wants to? Oh, CFO.
In the first morning of this COP, I read the newspaper and got this news. The COP considered the first report of the task force on this Article 6 and then endorsed the 2 sets of standards which is, according to the report, is conducive to the development of an international carbon trading market. We can kick it start. When I look into the details of these 2 pieces of standard, it's actually a kind of standard of estimating the kind of emissions or reductions from project, and then another piece of standard is the mechanism to monitor and verify the actual emission reduction from these projects. So from a technical point of view, these are really important standards because it's international standard. In the past, these are just sub-national or regional standards. There are other standards in the voluntary trade markets, but a lot of people don't like it. One set of standards, the other region don't like it. And for this set of standards, the other region don't like it. But for a set of international standards, I think the geopolitics can have some new charter on it. So, Hong Kong, we have established the voluntary carbon trading marketplace called Core Climate in Hong Kong. And we have been trading carbon credits accredited or certified under some of the standards. So in the past, for those what we call the compliance trading within a specific market, it will be difficult for other player or exchange outside the jurisdiction to take part in it. But with this Article 6, I think there is a new dimension for people to consider what will be its impact on the ecosystem of carbon trading. Because now it's possible for this even voluntary carbon trading to have some tie with the national carbon trading. So this is a new thing which everybody participating in the voluntary carbon trading market need to take a look in it and need to get prepared for it. From a broader perspective, I think our pathway to carbon neutrality or in combating climate action is always very, very challenging. And it requires a lot of investment. And relying on those who have the emission to do the job is not simply possible because they may not have the money, they may not have the resources. So this voluntary carbon trading mechanism, as well as other sustainable green finance mechanism, do provide a quick wins for us to divert the kind of finance from those who want to do more and have the resources to give assistance to those who need to do it but don't have the resources. So in overall sense, I think Article 6 is helping us moving towards this carbon neutrality pathway. But in the course of it, we need more careful look into every stakeholders, need more careful in looking into the kind of progress and see how we can tap on the opportunity to take part in it. For example, I'm not sure whether with this kind of advancement in international trading arrangement, is it possible for the Hong Kong as an international or regional financial service center to play a more important role?
Thank you. So,
Sorry, Merlin, if I
yes.
can just two things, quick things I wanted to add on top of what CF was mentioning. Mathematically, one ton of carbon, how much does it cost right now? Do people know? World Bank actually has a carbon price monitor. So for those who are not, check it out. It's actually a very interesting piece of information. Last I checked, like 2 minutes ago before I stepped on this stage, compliance credit is trading at a range of $0.46 per ton on the low side to $167 per ton. You can imagine if you're on the corporate side. I was also inquiring how much does a ton of carbon credit cost from a sustainable aviation fuel perspective. And you won't be surprised that it is actually more than $167 per ton, depending on who you ask. Now, given the heterogeneity of this particular product, then we need what Nancy was talking about, what CF is talking about, somebody who is here willing to put the hand up and say, I want to offset my carbon with quality projects, underline 3 times. Because you can technically offset yourself with something at the bottom of that pack, or you can actually invest, for example, in nature positive projects, good projects that may or may not cost you the same amount of price, but we do need corporates to actually make the right choices. I think that part is super important regardless of where the regulation will bring us.
Okay. Any other comments also on the Article 6 or carbon pricing?
Just quickly chiming, as about almost 10 years ago, I was involved in designing the California Carbon Trade Program. So I guess for those of you who are not familiar with carbon market, what 6.4 session, Article 6.4 does is it allows now the establishment of a global carbon market. So carbon market, essentially what it does is it will allow companies to either buy or sell their carbon credits. And in the world of carbon market, there are 2 types of market. One is mandatory, as Commissioner Wong just mentioned, voluntary market. So in the majority of the carbon markets in the world today, we with the scale and the size, we mostly look into mandatory carbon market, like China's ETS and EU's and California's carbon trade. But I think what this Article 6.4 unlocks this time, in my observation, is to allow a sizable voluntary carbon market. Now, I think that's where Hong Kong also comes into play, because as Serena was just talking about the price of a carbon. Now, if we allow you to put a price on carbon, how would you calculate carbon? It's a very fundamental question, right? So like Commissioner Wong also mentioned about monitoring, verification, and reporting. Now, Hong Kong, with a hub for a lot of listing companies, in the near future, companies will be required to report their carbon emission. So how would you actually operationalize in your businesses? And with the carbon that you're emitting, if you are interested in making profits from the carbon market, especially voluntary carbon market, how would you calculate your carbon credits value? Now, where would you acquire those credits from different kinds of projects? And where would you want to sell your credits if you have a surplus? I think these are questions really worth thinking and for businesses to get more familiar with and dive into if you are in a good position to expand your operation or your, I would say, your strategic development in terms of making profits from carbon emissions, not just viewing that as an obligation for you to reduce, but actually you can make money from it if you find ways to engage with the market. So I think that's what I wanted to share in terms of the Article 6.4, and it is a bit controversial when it comes to offsets, but I think the potential is also quite big.
Yeah, I want to quickly pick up, I think both also mentioned the dispute or controversy is like about the quality of credit, like the transparency, credibility. So maybe asking on behalf of corporates, actually we talk to them a lot. So the challenge for them is where to find real project at a good deal, maybe that's another story, like, but real good projects, like, any advice how they can start look into what are there's so many projects out there, different like standard mechanisms. So any advice like how they can look into good projects if they are considering getting credit to offset? How to start with like tips 1, 2, 3, anyone can comment on that? Or maybe difficult question.
Merlin, this is a really difficult one. All this international or regional standard in terms is actually to put those carbon reduction projects, translating them into some sort of certificate. What we call the accredited or certified carbon credits. So whether you believe it, the project is actually doing something, because it's in a voluntary market, it does not necessary to have, when I buy some carbon credit from Fan, if I believe she can do some reduction in carbon in her daily life, I can do so. There's no need to go for any exchange. But what I can see is I want to make an analogy with the operation of a supermarket. I've been using in trying to, because I need to communicate this Article 6 development with a lot of stakeholders within the government or other. It's very difficult to communicate. What I make use is the analogy of supermarket. Any brand supermarket, I'm not, is there here in Hong Kong. What are they doing in selling product? They sell different kind of product. They can sell those very high-end product or a very low-end product. Some may cost you only $1 or less than $1. Some may cost you more than $100. But they may be serving the same purpose in the design function of the product. So why the supermarket is selling different products? Because there are different customer and different demand. Some wants the more economic one. Some wants the more high-end one. Especially those with organic or fair trade or whatever. There are different kinds of product. But there is another dimension Hong Kong will be more interested. We may not be the producer or the demand side of this carbon credit. We are the operator of this supermarket. What we are doing is that we ensure that whatever product you put there is not fake product. It's not some sort of illegal product. It's not some sort of product with false claim. So I think once you did that, the customer will have their confidence on this marketplace and shop whatever product they want. So it's not a matter of we need to make sure that we have the $170 product to be shopped. We may still want the $0.5 product. Depends on our own need.
A good analogy. I think that helps a lot to other government officials. Pretty sure very much. I want to move a bit of the discussion. We discussed about subnational government collaboration. And as we know, Hong Kong, one country, two system, special administrative region, we don't need to submit our NDC, but we need to support China on that. And also my background, my last job is also in city network. Like there are this C40, Ecology on global different cities working together. I think this topic is maybe quite new for some of the audience in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is actually sort of city-state, like in that context. Maybe Dr. Tai first, I think, like practically, like when we talk about subnational collaboration, what are the possible mechanisms, how they really work together? And in terms of Hong Kong, I think last year also, I think the California delegation also came to Hong Kong. And how do we really like materialize and make this subnational collaboration move forward? And plus, of course, our audience are corporates, right? How can they be involved if we are talking about these subnational collaboration discussions? Yeah.
Sure, that is a really good question. I come from the world of subnational climate diplomacy. I work for California, which by its size of economy would be the 5th largest economy in the world. So it is subnational, but it is actually supranational. So I think my perspective from California might be a little bit biased and might not be instantly applicable for Hong Kong or cities. But I would say in California, one of the most important lessons that we've learned from the leadership the state has set in climate is legal by legislation. So I think without those codifying climate targets into law, into regulation, we would have lost our ability to act in many regards. So I think that's my most important takeaway from California's experience. Now coming back to Hong Kong or in general subnational's role in climate action, I think there are 2 areas worth looking into. One is the role of, or the linkage between climate change and public health and resilience. That's very much what put subnationals front and center because we are affected by climate on a daily basis. Think about the extreme weather, very hot summer days in Hong Kong. Think about the flooding and the hurricanes and all these climate disasters. They are real and they happen on most of the communities are being affected are at the subnational level that you can feel very directly. So I think this is an area that subnational has to do things to protect the health of its citizens and to protect the resilience of the communities that are being affected by climate change. Now, second, I think another important area is for subnationals to lead, and Hong Kong is setting a really good example is by policy. Hong Kong has the goal of 2050 carbon neutrality, being also have a very concrete roadmap already. Now, if you look at China, overall, China's carbon neutrality target is 2060. So Hong Kong is very ambitious in setting this goal and leading the city and the region to demonstrate what could be achieved in this journey to net zero carbon. Now, if you look at the US and the EU, the majority of the jurisdictions in the US, like California, we have a goal of 2045. It's about 5 years ahead of Hong Kong. But the majority of the jurisdictions in the US and EU are targeting 2050. So Hong Kong is, in doing this, aligning itself with international effort already and demonstrating to the rest of China what could be done in a more accelerated way. And I think Hong Kong has set up quite interesting policies and influential pathways to make this happen. But I think most importantly in all these actions is climate finance and finding ways for Hong Kong to demonstrate, like Commissioner Wong mentioned, carbon market is an example, insurance is another, carbon disclosure, how we manage carbon at the corporate level is another example. So I think Hong Kong could do a lot to mobilize the resources it has. And that is a very good example to show what subnationals can do contributing to the global climate agenda.
Nancy?
Yeah, I think the question, if there's kind of this ongoing conversation that this global set of COP may not be as fit for purpose, I think emphasizing the role of cities is tremendously important. And your question about, well, how are we creating that radical collaboration amongst cities? I think the approach that we're looking at is from a corridor, so a market perspective, right? And how much are you able to bring together the manufacturers, the logistics, you know, and because that does actually have its own natural industrial borders, and seeking to figure out decarbonization strategies or even circularity strategies in those areas. And I think that's incredibly important from a city bottom-up system perspective. So I think this emphasis on cities and the role of cities and actually how companies within that sphere, that market sphere, should radically engage, especially with financing support and such. Really important conversation to continue.
Thank you. Following up what Dr. Tai talked about is about the ambitions. Hong Kong's have climate action plan. I think like for those living Hong Kong, it's a joke. Like when we talk about climate action plan, we always complain it's not enough. Like we need a lot of like sector-specific actions. But if you put it globally, Hong Kong's plan is actually comparatively good to many. I would say personally. But and we have been doing good, particularly in public transport system. Actually, it's excellent in terms of emission. We peaked emissions already. Following up on that, I think, as said, like next year, countries need to submit their NDC, and Hong Kong does not need to. But I don't know whether you need to submit some assignment to also the national government to support them. I would want to ask our panelists here, like from your point of view, right? We know. Dr. Tai just now also mentioned climate finance market disclosure, which we think Hong Kong is doing quite good in terms of aligning the best disclosure internationally. And we have a section coming up also talking about insurance. So my question in general, like for the upcoming NDC in China and Hong Kong's contribution, what are your views that the specific actions that we should be or will be taking, or any advice from any of the panelists?
First, a very simple answer to your question. Hong Kong need to submit something in this NDC. When you look into and the writer is downstairs. And what are we doing is that we need to make a report to the Central People's Government about Hong Kong's ambition, strategy, and action. And what I want to highlight is that during the COP, we have been participating in for quite a long time, and we have been trying to, as you know, we have a mandate or a task to tell the Hong Kong story. But at the same time, we found that the people there are very interested in listening to the Hong Kong story. So why? Because many of them want to know something down on the earth, touching the ground, what we individual jurisdiction is doing in combating climate change. They want some real example. They want some real progress or real result of what they are doing. So we have been going there and telling what we are doing, how we change, how we taking forward the energy transition, how we stop the use of coal for power generation, how we take forward regional collaboration in the energy transition, how we promote EV, how we turn waste into energy, and how this helped Hong Kong to bring down our carbon emission. We reached our peak in 2014. We are now 25% below the peak in terms of the overall carbon emission in Hong Kong. We are 30% below the peak level in terms below 2014 in terms of our per capita carbon emission. How we are compared with other cities around the world. People love to listen to this. So I think in upcoming conference and in the way forward, we need and we can very important to play this kind of role to impress different negotiators, different stakeholders in this international arena on what subnational level is doing and how this bring forward the climate neutrality, carbon neutrality agenda.
Yes, yes. What I also want to say, like, So NDC is looking into the future, right? So when you report, make some assignment for the national government, they would ask like, what is your future outlook apart from telling the stories? So what would you see some of the actually upcoming highlight that you will be planning from the perspective here?
Although I know that the time is out.
No, that's wrong. It's only 15 minutes just now. Our section is 1 hour. I'll get another 5 minutes for us. Yeah.
Thank you. I have been responding like this one. When we take forward our carbon neutrality pathway, there are two very important elements, which we are not sitting in a room and dreaming for our ambition. Hong Kong is a very special place. We are not just doing climate change as a kind of politics. We are not the one who get elected and then we set out some ambitious target and everybody doing it, and then later on depends on the term who will take care of it later. But Hong Kong, when we have an ambition, when we have a target, we have an action plan. We have the kind of measures to support it. So whatever target we will be setting, whether we will be having more ambition, more aggressive target, it will be science-based. So what we need is to take stock of the development in terms of technologies, in terms of global experience in the past, say, 4 or 5 years every time, to see whether we can implement or taking forward additional carbon reduction measures. And then after that, we will review our ambition and see we will have a more aggressive target. So it's running this way and not that way.
Understand. Thank you. Other panelists, like your thought, like forward-looking, like for NDC or for Hong Kong actions, any other supplementation on really improvement areas that we want to advise the government as well, or anyone wants to make a comment?
Well, advising the government is
a policy recommendation.
Can I just wear my private sector hat and say that, there are things that we can do? Now, I think from a finance perspective, we've got great support from the government already, from all the policies that was, that has come out. Of course, we look forward to more of such. And one of those things that we were thinking about is how financial tools can be used as a facilitator. So case in point. We know that Nancy was talking about radical collaboration. So how do you get the suppliers, the people in the value chain and the manufacturing to get together? Now, of course, you already can influence from top to bottom through the value chain, but have we thought about actually if you put a financier head in it, you tweak the invoice settlement a little bit, maybe you can put the incentive a lot across the system and then go all the way deep into the SMEs, the manufacturing, the final person who is actually really looking into how the product was made, or promote circularity for that purpose. So there are actually tools that can be utilized, and they are not new ones. So mind you, I think we wanted to kind of think about forward-looking as innovation, but I wanted to highlight that there are existing products in the financial markets who can actually play that part. Not saying that we wanted to, sell more products or whatever, but then it's really thinking about all the different players, be it financiers, be it the manufacturers, be it the anchor buyers, putting together their minds to have a collaborative project. We've actually done one in Hong Kong with, I think, one of the participants down here on how do we really incentivize suppliers, basically just through how their invoices are paid. So, I think we wanted to really think through, these are not something that we need to find from the moon. These are actually things that you can actually find around us, that if we utilize the tools correctly or in a more innovative way, we can put the incentivification in place. I think with all the government support, with all the taxonomies that are coming out, we do look forward to be able to do more of that in the future.
Okay. Last question. Because I mentioned in the end interlinking climate and nature. I attended a few business sections in the business pavilions. I asked corporate how they can actually start. One of the first, they said, the most important is to make a nature strategy first. And there are also some other examples. So my point, I think my last question, picking up on Nancy's presentation, we know its importance. We want to make business case, but to advise business to start with exploring or identifying these business cases, what are the practical actions or advice for business to start this? What would be the easy points? I wanted to take this because that will also pave our way for our afternoon discussion, mostly focused on biodiversity and nature. So maybe Nancy and then anyone wants to comment on this interlinkage, and then, yeah, I'll close the section.
For those of you who can't see, we're looking at a watch here that's big, bright red that says, "You're over, you're over."
It's changing color all the time.
So I'll keep comments very short, but you're absolutely right. So I think, like for anything that you do in a business, you first have to understand what it is, what that impact is on your business, before you can think about what you're going to do to address that impact. And that's what a nature plan allows you to do. What we're advising companies to do is that at the same way that you've had to think about carbon or greenhouse gases, what is your impact? What is the impact on you? How do you capture that data? Increasingly, you have to talk to your suppliers. You're instilling processes, right, of both asking, capturing data, then using that data to formulate some approach of action. Start with that process in the same way that you're going to do with nature, because nature is just a different type of impact, right? So what we advise is start with what you've been doing and how you've been capturing, how you've been identifying materiality, how you've been capturing information from your suppliers and engaging with them, and think about that then as to how you're going to approach nature. So what you don't do is you duplicate effort and you do this separately, because it'll be a waste of time and energy within companies, and we just don't have time for that, right? We need to be smart and effective and efficient. So that would be the initial advice.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Quick takeaways from this wonderful discussion this morning. I think just three advice, actually back to your last question to Hong Kong. I think about the strength of Hong Kong. We're in a place that Hong Kong is really good at facilitating the free flow of goods, information, capital, money, and people. So I think these four strengths of Hong Kong, if you put it in a world of carbon neutrality and climate, think about how we decarbonize the shipping sector in Hong Kong and demonstrating how that could be done in aviation and in goods movement. In terms of the free flow of information, how can we use Hong Kong and build it into a center for a hub for green technologies? Especially despite the geopolitics, Hong Kong has a role to play in facilitating some of those transfers in the future. In terms of money and capital, Hong Kong as a future center for global climate finance, how can we use more tools here to leverage the role and making that more profitable for companies? And then lastly, people. How can we attract more talents? More people like to spend time in Hong Kong and contribute to this agenda. I think that's another area for Hong Kong to play a larger role. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. See if you want to add.
Yeah. Just 1 minute.
Okay. Help me close the section, please.
Yeah. The first thing is, although there are challenges ahead, there are lots of things happening. ISSB SS2 is coming. As many of us know that. CBAM is coming. This Article 6.4 is coming. The extreme weather events is more coming. So we can't wait, just. No matter the economic or political situation, the nature does not wait. So it's time for action.
Yes, thank you. I won't wrap this up. I think Dr. Dai and CF already helped us wrap it up. We want to work together and leverage Hong Kong's advantage on the carbon neutrality journey. So please give them a round of applause and then chat with them later. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Merlin, and all the panelists for the inspiring and interactive session, and let us know about what actions Hong Kong may take in order to tackle the climate problems. So may I invite all of you to come forward and take a group photo. Thank you so much. Please take your seats.